It is April 12th, 2025. Dwyer, money1776.com, a free site. Also, always 1776.com, a free site. Nothing I say in this video should be construed as investment advice. I want everyone to do their own due diligence. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Folks, just a quick nod to my sports betting crowd. The Lakers beat Houston. I want people to understand that at this time of year, where the season's about to end, some of these teams are resting their players. They're getting ready mentally for the playoffs. They've already checked out. Houston has locked in the 2 seed in the Western Conference. They had no reason whatsoever to play the Lakers hard. Lakers beat them. You should take that with a grain of salt, right? What's important to note here is that LeBron James is about to have played at least 70 games in a season with a negative plus minus, right? When you see a superstar with a negative plus minus on a team that is, a 50-win team, that should be a 5-alarm fire for you, right? I'm fading the Lakers in the playoffs. Let's talk about market conditions. Let's talk about some things that I think investors can profit off of. Right now, understand, Bitcoin is treated in the market as if it's a speculative asset, right? People view this as the highest risk-on asset imaginable because, of course, it has a very high beta. If the market sneezes, Bitcoin gets a cold. It somewhat tracks the NASDAQ index. Let me just make a point here. It's going to sound controversial, right, folks? Rather than go off historical numbers, and I know immediately I'm at the edge of the cliff, you need to think about this just intellectually. Bitcoin is non-sovereign. Bitcoin is limited supply. Bitcoin is actually the ultimate risk-off asset. It should not be tracking the NASDAQ index at all. In fact, what should be happening is it should be considered a safe haven asset like gold. In fact, folks, believe it or not, it's even more safe haven than gold, right? Because, of course, you have new gold discoveries, gold mines yet to be discovered, being uncovered, right? That's the history of gold. With Bitcoin, folks, the supply is the supply. It's pre-programmed. There's not going to be some undiscovered Bitcoin producer down the road. And of course, with Bitcoin, you're not subject to the whims of, bank lenders creating currency through debt issuance. So I need for folks to rethink this, because understand what hangs in the balance is a lot of money. If you understand that China's interest rates on its 10-year bond is 1.66%, in other words, it's at crisis level. If you understand that the United States is going to be dropping interest rates, at least the Fed's going to try, right? Because we're headed into uncertain times. Record credit card delinquencies, right? A slowing housing market in places like Texas and Florida, right? If you understand that these are tough times and you're headed for greater uncertainty, then you should recognize two things. That gold is going to continue to hit all-time new highs. and that silver should. Right? Just understand, investors are nervous. Some people are invested in cash as a hedge. Right, folks? I know it's counterintuitive in the moment. Bitcoin is the ultimate hedge. Let's continue. Not only do I expect Bitcoin to go up, but dare I say some altcoins are going to explode. Right? I need for people to think this through. You have a huge upgrade on deck for Ethereum. You have a heightened focus right now on the possibility, and it's a distinct possibility, of the U.S.'s Securities and Exchange Commission approving ETFs that allow for staking. Right, folks? The ultimate proof of stake, staking digital asset is Ethereum, which has a much bigger, let me repeat that, much bigger market value than Solana. Right? Truth be told, I'm into both, but my point to you is Ethereum right now, very bearish market for Ethereum. Believe it or not, should be an easy investment decision to make. Right? Meme coins, which have been Solana's bread and butter, are fading. Look at Shiba Inu. Just look at the chart. Right? Just based on its first mover status in the smart contract space. Just based on the growth of DeFi. Ethereum is a major play. Now I understand. People have, met up with their folks. It was President's Day. You were over at your folks' place for dinner. You're talking with older people who were raised on fiat currency, and things like Bitcoin, Ethereum, they're speculations to that crowd. Right? This is the crowd that when ATMs first came out, they were afraid to use ATMs. Right? This is the crowd that was afraid to buy things online because they didn't want their information online. Right, folks? You need to think through the intellectual part of the equation. Right? Why is gold a special asset in times of crisis? Why are central banks accumulating gold? It's because it's a limited supply asset. Right, folks? You understand, again, you can find more gold mines. That gold mine that someone owns, they might discover there's another part to it that has more gold. You're not going to find an undiscovered Bitcoin supply. It's not going to happen. Right? Think about portability. Think about the fact that the U.S. right now has embraced Bitcoin to the point where President Trump is talking about a digital asset stockpile. Right? Just understand that with gold, I get a bar. I look at the bar. I don't get the accounting that I get with Bitcoin. If I'm a merchant on the African continent with my cell phone, I can go through my Bitcoin wallet history and actually see the transactions and have some level of accounting. Right? Understand too, if they rob my phone these days, a lot of wallets require my fingerprint to log into my Bitcoin wallet, the new wallets. Right? With my phone, the thief can't do much, particularly if it's an unsophisticated thief. But if they steal my bar of gold, the thief has all they need to profit from the theft. Let's go to the third point I want to make, right? The first two is Bitcoin should be considered a risk-off asset, right? If you're just going by history, if you're just going by the fact that Bitcoin vaguely tracks the NASDAQ, you're missing the bigger story that Bitcoin's non-sovereign. You're missing Bitcoin's characteristics. Also, in terms of Ethereum, right, if you're ignoring the Ethereum story, the market size, the total value locked, the upcoming upgrade, right, then you're missing a lot. You're missing a huge part of the DeFi sector. Let's talk about another aberration, and there are going to be several, because what happens in economic slowdowns is that things get mispriced. It takes a while for the market to get things right. Markets only work with accurate information, right? It's only with accurate information that you get market equilibrium, sustainable market equilibriums. So right now, gold is on fire. It's on fire, right? It's at new highs. I believe in gold. I've owned gold for years. But just understand, when the gold-silver ratio gets above 100 to 1, something's wrong. Right, folks? Why isn't silver exploding? You understand that if, in fact, the banking system blows up, if fiat currency suddenly gets debased to the point where the world becomes like Venezuela used to be, where you have to weigh the amount of fiat currency to figure out how much it is, where from the time you enter the store to the time you leave, the price of fiat has changed significantly, such that the merchant has lost their benefit of the bargain. Right? I need for folks to understand that if that happens, you don't want to be carrying around gold coins where the value of one gold coin would be worth more than $3,000, which is where it is now, right? It's 3,200 something, right? No, you would want to be carrying around silver, wouldn't you? If I'm in the grocery store and I plan to spend, let's say $30, right? And I'm willing to get back change in fiat currency. Folks, I want silver coins, not gold coins, right? Gold is simply too valuable. Well, just understand, the gold-silver ratio should never be 80 to 1, much less 100, over 100 to 1. Silver right now is a compelling buy. Right? Understand, you don't have to play games with companies that say, we'll hold the silver for you. You can just buy at stores like Walmart silver coins. Right? So you actually have ownership of the silver. You actually remove the layer where you have to trust some custodial group. Right? So just take a look at silver. What history has told us is that the current gold to silver ratio is skewed in gold's favor to a point where silver is going to explode sooner or later. The all-time high, folks, is about $50 an ounce of silver. Silver hasn't gotten back to that for years. For years. It's below its all-time high right now. So if you're hearing that gold is making new all-time highs, and you realize that silver is still several dollars below its all-time high, you're just seeing an unrealized value accumulating on the silver side of the ledger. Let me make another point too. I know people are in risk-off mode here, right? I understand folks are selling stocks because they want to preserve their capital, right? That's a great priority to have. But it's when things are mispriced that you're getting compelling value. In other words, one of the best times to make money on investments, believe it or not, is when the market is tanking. It's when you can find great investments in the clearance bin. Now, the other day, believe it or not, Google, right? And Google's PE right now, believe it or not, is around the general market PE. It's not even getting a tech premium. Right? Google made a deal with a part of our federal government where the federal government now is going to be using, at least that part of the federal government is going to be using Google Workspace. Right? I encourage people to Google what I'm saying here about Google. Right, folks, they're so well positioned that the federal government is using their product. Understand, Google Workspace is really a portal to the rest of the Google universe. In other words, at first I sit down, I'm using Google Workspace, I can't find my way around. Then I start to see the features, and then I start to ask myself, gee, why am I not using this suite of products? Right? This is helpful. This is increasing my productivity. Right? Then comes the hard part. Then I start to ask myself tough questions. If this suite of products is productivity enhancing, why is Google, which truth be told has had some antitrust problems, right? Why is Google priced so much more cheaply than Amazon, than Meta? Right, folks, these are the questions to ask. Let me ask one here. Autonomous vehicles. How many are on the road in your neighborhood? Right? How many have you seen in the last week? Now, let me just say, if you know that there are several people, perhaps you, perhaps your friends, who would love to be able to read a book in a car that's self-driving on their way to work, right? Would love to be in a car and just not have to make the decisions needed with driving. If you understand that there is a huge market out there for autonomous vehicles and that the surface has barely been scratched, you know there's a huge demand, but you don't see it in your own neighborhood. If you understand that a mega city like Atlanta is just now getting Waymo, right, then just understand, folks, that's the upside for Alphabet, right? Google's parent company, Googl. You're getting Google right now at a pedestrian price, right? The real price is the PE. The real price is what you believe the future income is going to be. Right? I encourage folks to just Google Google's recent deal with parts of the federal government to use Google Workspace. This is a well-positioned company. You know how these things work. You know, you give an old person a cell phone to make calls. You know, you say, Grandma, just call me if there's ever a problem, right? If the, electricity goes out, she still has her cell phone. If she's kept it charged, she can still make calls. And then, of course, the next time you see Grandma, she's using Google Maps. She's surfing the internet with the phone you got her just to make calls, right? She's asking you about apps you haven't even heard about. She's uploading documents to Google Drive, right, folks? Now that a portion of the government is using Google Workspace, my goodness, is Google well positioned. Take a look at their PE. I think that's a compelling buy right now. Let me also talk about tariffs. Now, longtime viewers here know I hate tariffs. I consider tariffs to be a tax. I believe that if your local government knows economics, I believe that the fact that other countries are foolish enough to levy tariffs on your goods and services doesn't mean that you should levy any tariffs on theirs. You want to allow your voters, your consumers, to get these products at the cheapest price possible, because that allows them to save money and to spend the money elsewhere. Right? You know I hate tariffs. Let me just say that this tariff nonsense will pass. Right? This too shall pass. Trump has levied a lot of retaliatory tariffs on other countries. You also understand Trump's art of the deal. Right? He's put it in writing. It's in a book. Right? He is a guy who, just look at his pattern, is in a negotiation. His initial position is to have a high ask. In other words, let's say, you might owe him $200. He comes in, he asks for $500. Right? Then, of course, as you negotiate, he'll drop it to $250. Right? He still makes out, well, by the time he drops it to $250, you're just too exhausted dealing with this man. You're willing to pay the $50 premium just to have the deal done, just to get the certainty. Right? You also understand this is an important part of Trump, is that he is loyal. In other words, you want the business relationship with Trump. I know many are cringing hearing this, but this is the reality. You want the business relationship with Trump because you understand that there are long-term gains to be found from that relationship. Right? So Kash Patel backed Trump in the past. He's now the FBI director. Tulsi Gabbard, a Democrat, backs Trump, helps him prepare for a presidential debate, switches to Republican. She's now the director of intelligence. Right? Byron Donalds backs Trump. He's now Trump's preferred candidate, and Trump lets it be known. This is who Trump is. Right? Trump backs you publicly. Byron Donalds is now Trump's candidate to be the next governor of Florida, one of the biggest states in the union. Very important state from a presidential election point of view, too, given its electoral votes. Right? Right now, as I mentioned earlier in this video, China's 10-year bond rate is 1.66%. Right, folks, that's low for a reason. It's because China's having economic problems. Now, of course, China's going to look tough, right? These leaders need to show their constituents that they're working for them, that the United States is not going to bully them, right? You see that now in both Canada and Mexico, right? Even though we have a USMCA, trade deal with them, even though Mexico and Canada are two of our biggest trading partners, you would think we don't conduct trade with either, given all the tough statements. Right? You have an election in Canada where everyone's, talking about the evil United States. How they're going to stand up to the United States. Right? One of Canada's biggest trading partners. Right? Look at the reality, the actual trade. Don't look at the statements of politicians. Right? Both China and the United States are saying, hey, we're levying tariffs of greater than 100% against the other country. Folks, at the end of the day, there's just too much upside. And I mean this. There's just too much upside for a Chinese-American trade deal for both countries to foolishly have a trade war. Right? You have to anticipate both sides saying, hey, we've reached a deal. Right? This is not going to linger because it costs too much money. Right? So, let me just say, Alibaba, we'll call it the Michael Burry part of the market, right? Burry is into Alibaba. Burry of The Big Short. Let me just say that, Alibaba over the last month, believe it or not, has lost 20% of its value. I know it was up big yesterday. It's lost 20% over the last month. Just look at the chart. Right, folks? This is a stunning play. Because understand, Alibaba is well positioned. Right? Alibaba is like Google. You have to see through the fog. I understand right now we're nervous. I myself am nervous to buy goods on Temu, a retailer I have shopped with in the past, because I don't know where the tariffs land and stuff like that in the short term. The point is, you have to consider this to be the short term. I fully expect if someone is looking at this video 3 months from now, for there to have been a trade deal between the United States and China. Understand, Xi came to San Francisco. They even cleaned up San Francisco, right? Late in Biden's term, right? Met with Gavin Newsom, met with, I'm not sure if he met with Joe Biden, but understand, China's president understood that cooperation with the United States is so important that he physically traveled to California recently to meet with high-ranking officials. Right? So there'll be a lot of tough talk. All of this trade talk is like a boxing pre-fight, where, of course, everyone wants to look tough. There's the face-off at the weigh-in. Everyone saying the other fighter doesn't belong in the ring with them, hasn't earned a shot at the title, right? That's the way it always is in trade talks. Just understand, we're a long way from Smoot-Hawley, right? These are retaliatory tariffs. Trump already has extended it 90 days. Who knows what Trump's real long-term game is? Trump already has said he's optimistic he's going to reach a deal with China. Folks, there's an art to negotiating where you telegraph that you want to reach a deal without making concessions until the other side is prepared to make concessions. Right? Elon Musk, Trump's Doge guy, who's getting back to the business world. In other words, he's getting back to what really matters, in my opinion. Right? He's getting back to his investors. Understand, Elon Musk owns a factory. Tesla has a factory in China. That's how interconnected the world is. So I talk with friends, and everyone's acting like these tariffs are not gonna, drop anytime soon. Folks, you're kidding yourself. The United States already has been contacted by dozens of other countries who are willing to talk. I understand Howard Lutnick made some ridiculous statements. I understand others have made some ridiculous statements. The people in power, Trump, understand the need for trade deals. Right? I understand Trump has talked about tariffs somehow replacing the income tax. That's not going to happen. Right? The math just doesn't add up. But what I do think is going to happen is that we're going to reach deals with other countries that are under economic strain right now. You can tell China is under economic strain. You don't even have to listen to the official Chinese spokesman. You just have to look at the rate on their 10-year bond. When it's below 2%, as it is as I make this video, you know China is under economic stress. Right? You understand when Alibaba is dropping 20% in a month, that Chinese stocks are not in a bull market. We as Americans can just look at our credit card delinquency rate and know we're under economic stress. I don't need to listen to some government talking head. I can actually look at credit card delinquency numbers, courtesy of AI, now online, to know that the United States is under stress. When there's a win-win opportunity, you'll be surprised how ideology will take a back seat. I'm expecting a trade deal between the United States and China within the next 3 months. Right? I believe investors need to be forward-looking and need to realize that a lot of the tough talk right now is just that, tough talk. Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours. By the way, I consider Alibaba to be a compelling buy. Viewers here know I like Google. Again, I want everyone to do their own due diligence. Right? I'll just say when I see Alibaba drop 20% in a month, and I know they're involved in AI and a bunch of things, wrap it up, I'll take it. You don't have to put a bow on the package. Let me just say that Ethereum right now is priced as if it has no future. Understand, it's the altcoins that the market is going to discover eventually. Right? I expect the altcoins, some of them, to surpass the performance of Bitcoin, which the public knows about and has embraced. When I say altcoins, I don't mean all altcoins. I expect most cryptos to fail. But just understand, you need to view these coins as a tool. Right? What role do they have? Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours in the comment section of this YouTube video. Thanks for stopping by.